So I would like to talk about expectation. In his poem Expectativas, Mario Benedetti writes of his expectations as he prepares to return home to Uruguay after an exile of 12 years. And he says, "He quedado en suspenso. Lo espero todo y no espero nada." So the line can be translated, I hold myself in abeyance. I expect everything and I expect nothing. In that version you have, I put I await. But I think the better translation is I expect everything and I expect nothing. As evocative as Benedetti's poetic statement is, reflecting the profound ambiguities of human experience, it seems to me that we cannot truly expect everything and nothing at the same time. At least not once we embark along a path with its concrete, particular commitments. So said otherwise, it seems to me that embodiment produces concrete expectations. We don't expect everything and nothing, but we do expect something. And few things illustrate this more vividly than pregnancy. An expectant mother asks, hoping to receive, searches, hoping to find, and knocks, hoping the door will be open. Her concrete expectations will vary, but they will be alive and powerful. When I was pregnant with our oldest child, a daughter, it was a tumultuous time in Argentina, during which my husband was laid off from his job. So I was thinking, be calm. Everything is going to be fine because this baby is not going to be affected by the fact that we don't know exactly how we're going to feed ourselves, much less the baby. We often lived hand to mouth at that time. None of this, however, dampened the excitement and generativity, both of teaching theology and becoming a mother together at the same time. My first kind of real job. The sense of expectation was somewhat marred by nervousness about the momentous nature of what was going to happen, becoming parents, and that fear of maybe something will go wrong. We don't know what, but that vague fear. But we were also full of hope. So we awaited our child and we trusted that with her would come enough bread to feed her, in accordance with the saying, los hijos nacen con un pan debajo del brazo. Literally, children come into the world with a loaf of bread tucked under their arms. In other words, have no fear. Do not the birds of the air and the lilies of the field have enough? Do they not have provision made for them? So we trusted and waited, and our child was born in the fullness of her time, and we were filled with wonder at her, as so many parents had been before us and continue to be today, upon the birth or adoption of their children. The concrete expectation of having a child that had characterized the pregnancy was indeed realized, and in turn opened the doors to new expectations and to renewed hope. And yet, I find that expectation as an epistemological category has important limitations. For one thing, it is bound very closely to seeing. Expectare means literally to look forward or to look ahead. In other words, the term skews toward the visual dimension of what we await. As we can see with the expectation experienced in pregnancy, vision is not enough, even with the latest imaging techniques, which in the case of my oldest daughter we didn't yet have, so it was a blur. Now some people can actually see the features of the child, and yet we desire to hold, smell, and touch the coming child as well. Furthermore, not everything hoped for can be seen. As the experiences of the disciples of Jesus illustrate, even if we do behold a divine mystery, it doesn't mean we've fully grasped it. I have come, says the Johannine Jesus, that those who do not see may see, and those who do see may become blind. John 9:39. The spiritual blindness of which he speaks is grounded in a lack of humility, the certainty that we can indeed see all that is needed. If our expectation is based solely on what we have already seen, or on an exaggerated certitude about what we will see in the future, we leave no space for the new and as yet unimaginable things God has promised to do. Nonetheless, when we ponder expectation, it is difficult to get away from an over-reliance on the visual. Recourse to the Old Testament or the Hebrew Bible can help ground our reflections. Significantly, tactile, olfactory, and auditory dimensions are implicit in the Hebrew tikva, often translated as expectation. The word literally means a cord, something to which we can attach ourselves or to which we can be attached. Such attachment can symbolize the ground of our hope. It is much more palpable and corporeal than the expectation leaps slowly to looking or seeing. For instance, in Psalm 9:18, we read that the expectation, tikva, of the poor shall not perish forever. Such expectation is economic and material, not intangible. It has to do with the conviction that God does not sanction the unjust distribution of resources, that justice will prevail quite concretely. One might imagine expectation in the Hebrew sense of tikva as a kind of umbilical cord, connecting the expectation for sustenance of the infant to the body of his or her mother in a way that leaves an indelible mark. Later, other forms of sustenance will take over, such as breastfeeding or solid food, but the materiality of the nurturing connection will continue to be necessary. We might say that likewise our expectation upon God, our tikva, is concrete, and we can expect that it will be fulfilled in a wholly new yet still palpable way. We can also expand the semantic field of expectation by pondering one of its related dimensions, anticipation. The very word ante plus capare, take into possession ahead of time, so to speak, incorporates a tactile dimension that enriches the visual emphasis embedded in expectation. The temptation to override the present by looking either too much to the past or to the future seems inevitable. But a combination of expectation and anticipation can do much to link past and future to the present in ways that allow it to be more meaningful, vivid, and intense. At its best, the celebration of the Lord's Supper in community is exactly such a moment. We are invited to take and taste the bread and wine. At our seminary, sometimes in the bulletin, it says, the body of Christ is gluten-free. I think that's hilarious. But anyway, sometimes it tastes better than others. But we're invited to taste. I thought it'd be a good title for a book. The body of Christ is gluten-free. We're invited to taste this. Right now we can taste it, but it's also an anticipation of that eschatological banquet. That which is to come. It's a celebration ahead of time. So we become for a moment capable ahead of time, ante capare, of that which we hope to behold in the future, expectare. The palpability and materiality of the elements are central and indispensable to the Eucharist, as is the communal nature of the shared meal, reminding us that expectation is never an isolated or an individualistic matter. This holds for pregnancy as well, though it is important not to erase the particularities of an expectant's mother experience and the fact that her body is her body. It would not be wise to privatize the experience of pregnancy and birth. The expectation that arises from the birth of a child is mediated socially. It's shared by a community made up of many people, including those who cannot or actively choose not to bring biological children of their own into the world. Expectation is a shared experience. It's lived out in a social and ecological context, not only in the realm of our private subjectivities. The complexity of childbirth and childcare in the first few months and years of life tend to transform everything into somewhat of a blur, even if we try to register our impressions in writing or through photographs and film. You know those little books that they give you, how much did the child weigh, whatever, and they're always filled in the first 2 or 3 pages, and then the blur takes over and it's just empty pages. We don't know. I can't remember much of anything about when my twins were babies. There was no time even to take a shower, much less to write remembrances in little books. I remember thinking some people can actually watch a movie, but I cannot, because if I did, it would mean that the precious few hours for sleep would be gone. So once the babies were born, there was little space for reflection and even for sleep, and concentrating on their basic needs was paramount. It's only in retrospect and with the help of the memories of a community that we as parents are able to put together a portrait of our expectations and experiences at the time of our children's arrival. People remember vividly things from when my babies were small that I have no idea happened. Or students remember anecdotes that I would tell about them in class that I have no remembrance of. They help me reconstruct this memory. So our memories of our expectations for our children are also very much shaped by our present history with them. To me, I think something similar happens in the community of faith each year in the season of Advent. I'm glad we were somehow supposed to get Advent in here because this fits with that. With the aid of the Spirit of God, we remember and recreate in retrospect and in light of the resurrection, our expectation regarding the baby Jesus. And in turn, this work of communal expectation helps guide us as we walk in the world in hope. To ponder the birth of Jesus as a community of faith living in expectation is also to realize that alongside our expectation of God, God has expectations for us as God's creation. As a theologian, I found my own experiences of expectation related concretely to pregnancy, childbirth, raising children, quite stimulating to creativity. On the one hand, you're very tired. On the other hand, there's a kind of creativity that comes. Hopefully, they don't cancel each other out. They have allowed me and continue to allow me new insight into the pneumatological dimensions of life, in particular to the role of the Spirit as our mother, John 3:3-7, as an active force in our adoption as children of God, Galatians 4:6-7, and Romans 8:15-16, and as a midwife helping creation give birth to new life, Romans 8:20-27. To become a mother has led me to ponder the implications of God's adoption of us as children, as well as the notion of God's fecundity. One of God's characteristics is to be expectant with regard to us as God's creation. For surely I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for your welfare and not for harm, to give you a future with hope. Jeremiah 29:11. God's expectation of us and for us is ultimately the origin and end of our expectations of God and of each other whenever they are life-giving. The embodiment entailed in following the path of discipleship alongside others helps generate concrete embodied expectations. We don't expect everything and nothing. We do expect something. And that something has to do with the fullness and fecundity of God, as manifested not just as our hope and expectation in God, but primarily as a confidence based on God's hope and expectation for us as God's good creation. The mutuality of that expectation allows us to look forward, expectare, and even begin to anticipate, antecapare, in small ways, not only a new heaven, but also a new earth to be marked by justice and peace.